Hello and welcome to the Future of Hospitality series. Today we are turning our focus to restaurant design and discussing what the future of hospitality environments may look like in a post-COVID world. Joining me in the panel today are three of the UK's leading figures in hospitality design, including Robbie Bargh, the founder and director of Gorgeous Group, Ollie King, the founder and director of Engine Service Design, and David Chenery, the founder and director of OSP. Also joining the panel is Global Group Director of Growth and Innovation at Compass Group, Louise Pilkington. Many thanks to everyone for joining me today. And to start with, can I ask everyone to introduce your business and explain how you got into hospitality? I'm going to ask Ollie to start with, if that's okay.
Sure thing. So Engine is a service design consultancy business, which means we help businesses to define and deliver outstanding customer and employee experiences. We've worked in hospitality a lot, helping all sorts of brands define and differentiate their guest experiences throughout their properties, including the ways that guests check in, the product in the room, and the way guest services are accessed and delivered.
Fantastic, thank you. And then can I ask David, perhaps you can explain how you got into the industry?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gavin. Object Space Place is an interior architecture company based on designing environments to support better hospitality. We started really as more of a general interior design practice probably about 8 years ago. And then about 3, we really started to focus our offer down on hospitality. And the reason for that really was that we just felt hospitality is the sector that gives you the best chance to influence an entire experience. Quite fond of the principle called, well, not so much a principle, there's the kind of circle of intimacy, the principle where you look at how the senses get more involved when you get down to things like smell and taste. And I think when you're dealing with things like retail, you don't get to engage with people in the same level. So that and the fact that hospitality really is a fantastic people business just really both came together to be an industry that we wanted to be part of. Plus, I'm a lady, so selfishly, research is fun.
I can agree more. Hospitality definitely is a people focused place. And then Louise, perhaps you can explain how you got into Compass Group and why you're in the office today.
So yeah, I have the privilege of being in our office today in Chertsey, largely because we are tasting food, and that's not something you can do digitally, I'm happy to say. So I've been with Compass for about 5 years. My role is about growth and innovation for the group, and so one of the things that I've been challenging myself with recently is, before COVID, how do we future-proof our offer? How do we deliver a really fantastic customer experience for working people, in 3 to 5 years' time? And if you were to start a business today doing what we do, what would it look like? Probably very different to the business that we've evolved to be. So challenging ourselves to do things differently is what I do. And I actually got into hospitality. I love feeding people. I have an Irish granny who, would never rest unless everything from the table was eaten. And so I love feeding people. And when this came up as an opportunity to learn more about food at lots of different levels, I was very excited by it. So that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. And then finally, we had a few technical issues with Robbie. Hopefully he's not going to be on mute and we can welcome him to the team. Hi, Robbie.
Hello.
Hello. Could you just tell us a little bit about your business, Gorgeous Group, and how you got into hospitality?
So yeah, my business is I'm a founder of Gorgeous Group, and we create concept creation for hospitality, working with hotels, airlines, retail, workplace, cruise liners, everyone who's not working today. We work on and basically I got into it because I used to have well, I've always loved the business of people. I'm an operator through and through, and I'm not a designer, but it's something I love doing. I used to have some dodgy jobs when I was a young kid growing up, and then I realized I had to get a proper job, and I went into, I met this amazing lady who basically taught me how to make a restaurant feel amazing, and I started from there. And but I've had Gorgeous Group now for going on 20 years.
Wow, It's very impressive.
Yeah.
Well, as you're on the line still, Robbie, and we've still got you, perhaps the first question can be for you.
Right.
What is the current discussion with your clients and contacts with regards to redesigning their restaurants and hospitality spaces when they reopen? Have businesses started the process of reimagining their layouts and concepts?
They are, we're, lots of our clients, I mean, I think everyone is struggling to, with the unknown of what this means. And it's a real tricky one. But at the end of the day, I think it's quite exciting because this is an opportunity for a bit of a reset. And I don't think it's about going back to normality. I think it's this is almost like a new gateway for us for new things. So they're really, they're worried. Existing clients with existing, restaurants, they are waiting to basically hear what, the government tells them that, the strategy, what is that going to look like? What are those parameters? And then once they understand what those parameters are going to look like, then it's about them having to realign, refocus, and repurpose and come up with a strategy which then can deliver something which makes sense and can deliver on the emotional elements which the guest wants. And then once you understand the strategy, is coming up with the experience. So what does that look like? What those concepts look like? But firstly, it's about finding out what that what we have to adhere to. At the end of the day, we should not be thinking that we're designing concepts or restaurants around the coronavirus. We need to be designing restaurants and bars and cafes and lounges which are amazing experiences, and they just happen to tick the box of the coronavirus, the health and safety legislation. So that's really quite exciting for me, because you have to move things forward, but we need some sort of guideline before we can put that strategy in place, and then we apply the strategy to the creator and create the concepts. That's existing clients. With new projects, it's slightly different, because everyone again is waiting to understand what that legislation will look like, and then they need to put together again what that strategy will look like, and then once they understand what that looks like, and they do some business planning around that, and then we define a concept based on what the economics tell us what to do. But we need to have we need to be told what the guidelines look like before we come up with the strategy, and then before we can do the concept, we have to get the strategy right. If we don't do the strategy and we go straight to concept, then we're wasting money, and we can't do that. But we shouldn't we should not be thinking about designing restaurants and bars which just tick coronavirus boxes. This is about designing great restaurants and bars which just happens to tick all these boxes as well, or else it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Ollie, can I ask, have you found the same experiences with your clients?
Very much, and I totally agree with what Robbie said there. It's about good design and great experiences, and that's going to become even more important than before. For us, looking more broadly across the other sectors that we work in, we see that there are kind of three types of conversation that are going on. One conversation is really almost the emergency conversation, and it's about restarting. So what's the sort of minimum viable experience that we can deliver? So that's very much looking at things from an operational perspective, very attentive to the requirements of your customers and the requirements of your staff for safe working environments. And then there are other conversations which are really about how do we go about reconfiguring now what we do, realizing that there are a bunch of new guest requirements, employee requirements that we have to work with? How do we begin to work together as an organization across various channels, whether it's kind of, on in the kitchen, the shop floor, digital? How do these things come together to deliver a great experience consistently based on those new requirements, and then get back into the age-old things about how do we do it better than the next guy? How do we make it more unique? How do we make it more desirable? And then the third type of conversation that we hear are are ones where businesses are really beginning to reimagine what their future might be like. That's much more about sort of transformation that's going to take place within organizations, and perhaps what's happened over the last few months is only just going to accelerate that. But they're there and they're kind of going, actually, we need to think differently now. There are opportunities that are opening up for us to become a different type of business. Perhaps some of the things we were planning to do, we don't need to do, and we need to reimagine and rethink what we're about.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Continue with the sort of post-pandemic guidelines, what we currently know regarding social distancing. We've been talking to a lot of chefs about this with Michelle Roux and Hugh Fairley-Whittingstall. And they have very clear challenges that they've outlined in their response to the current outlines of opening up their restaurants. So my next question is, what effects do you believe social distancing will have on fine dining and casual dining going forwards? And I'm going to ask David if he can start with that one, please.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I do think it's a complex question, and I think before you get into what effect it will have on the experience, I think you need to deal with the business plan issue first. I think a lot of the responses I've seen where people are getting particularly animated at how impossible it is, that the first part of that that's causing most of the stress is the idea of trying to have 30% or 40% of your covers and literally be able to survive. And it's pretty clear to me that government assistance is required to make that feasible. But if you assume that there has to be a certain level in there to level the playing field and make it possible, then it does come back to, I guess, the questions that that Ollie and then Robbie touched on, that you start with strategy first. Why do your customers love you? What is it that you're particularly great at, and how can you deliver that in an engaging fashion in this context, which starts with looking at hybrid business models, which starts with, can you do something in terms of delivery, whether that's fine dining delivery. There have been examples in New York where people are, restaurants that you can't book a table at, and they're now able to do $70,000, $100,000 of takeaway a week, off the back of this. There are pubs, even at a different scale. There are pubs. I saw one a few days ago on LinkedIn was saying that since they've moved to takeaway and shut the pub, they're more profitable now than they were when they were operating as a pub. Question how the pub was run in the first instance. That's still interesting, and I think strategically you look at that, work out what people love about you, and then see how you can deliver that in different formats. And then beyond that, I kind of touch on a little bit, I guess, what Ollie's saying, that social distancing, or physical distancing as it should be called, because we're not trying to be less sociable, we're just trying to be physically apart from each other. It's really a set of very onerous health and safety regulations, and we don't let health and safety ruin or dominate everything else we do. So why should we do the same with this? If you were going to really flip this, you can make the economics stack up, then you could be able to think, well, hang on a second, I'm going to be serving half the number of guests in my space here. How can I make their experience even more special? Okay, yes, we probably have to wear face masks and gloves, although actually, if you read the PPE guidance in the latest stuff from the government and the World Health Organization, it's quite complex as to what you actually require. But those things aside, how can we make it more special? How can we justify asking these people to come out in the current situation as lockdown eases and give us their business? So I think before we even get to how they're going to be altered, I think you need to deal with those first issues, which I don't know if everyone is necessarily dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Louise, can I ask you the same question? How you believe social distancing will impact parts of our business as well as the fine dining operations?
Well, if I kind of follow on from the last conversation, I think if I take a different lens, which is the consumer lens, do we believe that there will be any less appetite in the longer term for people eating out? No, I don't actually. I think, like many people I know, I am desperate to be able to go and eat a meal that I haven't cooked, that is a really special experience and is a treat. I think what you could see with a new economic model is potentially we'll have to ask consumers to pay more, and eating out potentially could become the treat that it used to be. I think in the last few years it has become a little bit commoditized. I think, when I was younger, eating out was a real treat, and you would go somewhere special, and maybe it was something you did once a week or once a month. And now it's almost something you do as a matter of course on a Saturday lunchtime, a Wednesday night, whatever. And we've got used to being able to buy that experience quite cheaply. I think if businesses can, as Ollie and sorry, I'm distracted by Robbie's name on the screen.
David.
If we really invest in that experience, then why wouldn't you be prepared to pay what it takes for that restaurant to be open? So I think you do really have to re-examine your business model. I think from our point of view, the challenge that we face is eating at work is a massive part of the work experience. It's how you build relationships with your colleagues. Those relationships are how you are happy at work. They make you more productive at work. So thinking about social distancing and keeping people apart is a really miserable concept that doesn't sit well with that. And actually, I was talking to a colleague earlier and she said she'd spent the whole day, and she worked out at the end of it, she'd spent the whole day working out how to keep people apart. And that's not what we do. We bring people together. And so I think in the short term, of course, people will be looking for safety and reassurance, but I think quite quickly we need to get to a place where we make that experience feel human, we make it worth paying for, we make it worth going to work for, and that's our challenge. The kind of intermediate stage, I think, that Ollie was describing, which is kind of redesign. Yes, of course, we need to get into reimagine, but at the moment, most of our clients and consumers are trying to get their heads around what coming back to work will be like. And I can tell you from experience, it's slightly weird and scary, a bit like going to the supermarket now. It's not like going to the supermarket was. People think they're going to come back to work and it's going to be like it was. It's not, it's odd. But we have a job as hospitality providers to make it welcoming, make it human, and make them feel like they want to come back and connect and eat with us.
Yeah, I can agree more with those sentiments. Which then follows on to the next question, which is about these hybrid operations that we've been seeing popping up. And David, you mentioned a pub which has diversified into many different things. One of the pubs I went to last week in Crystal Palace is a florist slash grocers slash pub slash takeaways off license. So I've seen a lot of immediate examples of how this is working, and perhaps they're making more money as a result. But with that mindset, with the amount of high street restaurants reopening with hybrid operations, do we think this trend is likely to continue post-COVID-19, i.e. in 1 or 2 years' time? And I'm going to ask Ollie for his thoughts on that one, if that's okay.
I think, first of all, I think David, you made an excellent point there about reframing social distancing to physical distancing. I think that's brilliant, and we should carry on with that. But Gavin, to your question, I think that in some respects, it's a brave new world. You know, there's new territory out there. It's a time for pioneers. It's a time for entrepreneurs, and I think those that find success with their hybrid offers, I think that will stick. And I think the challenges for those guys is you know, as more businesses kind of come back online around them, can what they have created remain relevant going forward? And we've seen lots of businesses that have created wonderful hybrid offers. You know, you know, you go back to things like the smoking ban when it came in, and thinking that, you know, that's it, you know, pubs are finished. But then they discovered great food, and suddenly they were doing better than they'd ever done before. So I think it's about finding the right offer for your customers that appeals to them, and keep going with that. You know, there is going to be a lot of change. There are massive opportunities out there, and if a business can, you know, spot that opportunity, create the right solution, then yes, I think that's going to stick.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Robbie, can I ask you the same question? What are your thoughts on the hybrid models going forwards?
I think it's amazing. I think it's brilliant, and it's not just you know, this is not just about casual dining either. This is happening in destination restaurants, amazing bars, you know, world-class, award-winning bars, and amazing hotels. So I think the hybrid is going to be with us for a long time, but it's not going to be, you know, the hybrid has got to be about the whole experience. It can't just be about the food, and I think that's really key, because at the end of the day, you know, I mean, we are working. Gorgeous Group are working on some hybrid concepts which we can drop into hotels around the world, and you know, they are, you know, lounges which are also coffee shops, or restaurants which actually, you know, produce stores, and they're bars which are bottle shops, and they just got to make makes sense from an experience and from the economics. But you can't, it's really hard to retrofit a concept with, another purpose. You have to really understand the strategy right at the beginning, and make sure that the economics can work. And then you have to flip it and do the creative and come up with the experience. But it has to, it's much easier doing this from a planning and strategic point of view than it is in retrofitting. And I think, I'm seeing some great restaurants, great bars up and down the country and in the US and some in Asia, actually, and a little bit in Europe, where they are really adapting. And it's quite nice to see people having to think on their feet. But most of them are doing it for goodwill more than actually making some real serious money. Maybe there's the odd one or two. But if I'm a fine dining Michelin star restaurant and I'm suddenly doing click and collect, it's going to need to be more than the food. So I think this is going to be with us to stay. We're going to have to make our concepts, whether they are the workplace, whether they are in hotels, or they have to work harder and smarter. We need more robustness when it comes to these experiences. So I think this is here to stay. But we need to really think about what that actually looks like, and then make sure that our teams and our supply chains, and we can deliver something. And actually, it's a nice opportunity to work, to really look at our supply chain and think, okay, I want to work with great suppliers who can actually help deliver and enhance the experience.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It keeps going back to the idea of an experience, and that at the heart of all of this, what we are delivering is experiences to our customers. You talked about retrofitting, and something that we have seen a lot of quite recently is retrofitting technology, whether it's going to be click and collect or delivery services, which leads on to the next question, which is, do you think that technology will play a greater part in the consumer experience and restaurant design going forwards? If so, can you give some examples of technology solutions that you think may be popular or useful? And I'm going to go over to Louise first, because I know you're already working on a number of digital projects, hence why you're based in Chertsey. Perhaps you can explain your thoughts around this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think in our world, there is a real need for, there was always a real need for convenience. And so services like click and collect, pre-order, were things we were already working on and starting to roll out. Now, in response to the crisis, we're looking at opportunities to book space in a restaurant, to create physical distancing and avoid queuing, and make people feel comfortable that they can come down at a particular slot, maybe even arrange to come down with colleagues and friends so they can eat a safe distance apart together. So I think technology that really enables that convenience is key within our business. But some of the things that I've seen even before the crisis, some of the restaurant chains that have pay at table apps that really address that kind of need for once your meal is finished and you just want to pay and go quite quickly. I could see that really helping in the current climate, because that does reduces labour, it reduces the need for contact, it means that you can move quickly out of the restaurant, which potentially means that more covers can come in. So yeah, I think the technology piece is here to stay, and certainly it has accelerated for us many things that we were working on before. Just as an aside, my husband is a headhunter in IT, such an exciting job. He recruits CIOs, and one of the things that he's observed, which I've seen in our own business, is actually this crisis has allowed people to kind of leapfrog 20 years of reluctance to invest. So I think we'll see a lot of investment in technology that wouldn't have happened before, but now, crisis is the mother of invention, and I see that really creating some positive experiences for the consumer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I have a question about silver linings at the end of all of this, because I do think there'll be a lot of positives that come from it, as well as a lot of challenges that are going to be springing up in front of us. Which sort of leads me on to the next question regarding spatial design within the restaurants. So before the coronavirus, it was recommended that restaurants each have 1.4 square meters of space. Amid the pandemic, however, the World Health Organization have recommended this to be increased to 2.5 square meters per diner. Do you think this will be long-lived or realistic? And we're going to ask David first for his thoughts around spatial design.
I thought you would do. I did a quick calculation earlier on that just to work out. I knew exactly what that meant. Yeah, moving from 1.4 square meters to 2.5 would effectively give you a capacity reduction of 44%. So you'd be operating at 56% capacity. So if you have 100 square meters that would previously allow 71 guests in, this would now go down to 40. So whether I think that's realistic or not, the challenge we've got, and I think Ollie touched on it earlier, is that actually we don't know what the government wants. And we aren't necessarily aligning with what the World Health Organization have been saying so far. Obviously, they haven't actually released guidance for what dine-in restaurants will be like with social distancing, because we're not at that stage yet. They've only done takeaway and delivery, which doesn't cover this because everything's closed. But they have touched on retail. And if you look in the retail guides, it's actually not particularly helpful. What they actually base it on is that everyone has to do an individual risk assessment to work out the number of customers they think they can safely get in to get as close as possible to 2 meter social distancing. So at the moment, we don't actually have proper guidance to work off of. So I don't know if that World Health Organization requirement will be something we need to look at as being realistic, because it will completely depend. If you do have to look at 2 meter distance between people, it's very different to having a capacity maximum, because 2 meter distance in a tiny, thin high street unit in London is going to be almost impossible to make work. Whereas a nice, big, spacious, out of town restaurant, you might be able to make that work. So as for how long it might be around when we do have that in place, I mean, if anyone knew the answer to that, I think they would be a very, very rich person. My gut feel is that there's going to be some sort of social distancing measures tapering down for 6, 9, 12 months even. But the other thing I think important to note is, obviously you've picked out a particular statistic from the World Health Organization there, but even in the government's guidance, they note that physical distancing measures, as I will now call them for the rest of the call, are a set of measures that they will be constantly refining and updating, because they're not there just for the sake of it, because here's the textbook on physical distancing. They are there to try and perform a function and limit a certain level of risk. So they're going to keep redesigning those. And obviously the reason that social distancing or physical distancing can't work in restaurants right now, well, we know that it can't. That's why they're closed. And as soon as the level of risks that comes from having that smaller essential interaction is okay, then they will get opened up. I don't know if that fully answers your question or just kind of goes around the houses on it, but that's my thoughts.
Well, I think it perfectly leads into my next question, which again is about the safety of our customers and creating the right environments. So it's regarding plexiglass dividers, and there's a lot of talk about sustainability at the moment. And by adding lots of plastic into our restaurants, there is a challenge around the sustainability of that going forward. So I guess my question is, do we think that's the way forward? Are there more sustainable solutions for socially distanced our diners? And do you have any recommendations? And Ollie, I'm going to ask you if that's okay. You seem to be the guy for sustainability.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, no, I think that can only ever be a temporary solution. I mean, I think coming back just on the previous point as well, what I'm really interested in is how what happens when physical distancing meets alcohol, and how does everybody respond to that? So we can put plans in place. I think the clearly we don't want to fill our properties full of plastics. We need to be much more imaginative about it. I think again, as the kind of the clock ticks on, businesses will explore and find ways to do this differently. There have been great examples that I've seen in the Netherlands. A restaurant called Mediamatic, who have been experimenting with, you might have all seen this, like little kind of greenhouses out on a quayside, and kind of serving things into that, which looks wonderful. So I think it's really about needing to step back and reimagine what the experience is that you can provide in these spaces. Like we're not going to go back to doing what we did 10 weeks ago. We need to reimagine what it is now, and how that can be meaningful and valuable. I think we have to, the regulations are going to get refined as we go forward. We know there is a degree of confusion out there now in terms of things. So, for example, you could easily argue that groups, households who have been physically distancing for weeks by themselves, there's no reason why they couldn't go out and be together, and perhaps be together in a closer space. So perhaps there are new opportunities there for new propositions that deal with different groupings of people, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Louise, can I ask you?
Can I jump in on that? Is that all right?
Yes, go for it, David.
It's just we do quite a lot of work around sustainability and been members of the Sustainable Restaurant Association for the last few years. So it's something we've been looking at and aware of as well. And just on that very specific point, I mean, I think all of Ollie's points completely stand. That specific point around use of perspex, there are a few specific products you can look at. So there's one called Green Cast, which I think is 100% recycled acrylic in the first place. And then the other plastic, I need to look into the actual real nitty gritty of it, but polycarbonate is considered to be more sustainable than perspex as well. So that's another route to go down. But I think the main thing, if you are looking at screens, is that you need to be designing something that is in line with the DNA of your brand, because another route could be upcycling. I mean, if you're going to a reclamation yard and getting some interesting discarded windows, actually pieces of glass that are coming out of other sites, if that suits your DNA as if you have an eclectic interior, that could be a really interesting way of doing it. Or the greenhouses like Media National have done. But if you're slicker, then you need to find a way to do that. It is really important we don't just generate stuff that goes in the skip, because that one of the things that's coming out of this is how much we care about each other. The rise of altruism and doing stuff just to survive for now is not really good enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think sustainability will slowly rise at the top of the agenda. I think now it's all about going back to the workplace, going back to restaurants and, re-establishing the economy. But I think very soon the discussion around sustainability will become more and more important. Louise, you have a global overview of how our businesses are managing and responding to the crisis. Is sustainability a hot topic elsewhere? And have you seen any good examples of that?
I think what I've seen over the last few weeks is, first, obviously, China was the first country to go back for us, and we saw some really horrific pictures of people at tables with cardboard dividers that looked desperate and soulless and not like a place you'd want to eat. And then kind of gradually they got a little bit more sophisticated. And now what we're seeing is that sort of thing disappearing and being replaced with more subtle kind of table markers that just remind people of how to keep a safe distance. I think that is the way forward, really. I would hate to go to a restaurant that had a plexiglass, I can't say the word, a screen between me and the people around me. I just think that would feel like I was some kind of animal. So we've seen that kind of disappear. I think, the conversations we've been having with clients around sustainability have been leading in with the plastics issue, because of course now we're wrapping food, we're boxing food, and we had, with our clients, done a really good job of moving away from disposables and using reusable stuff. And I think there's a recognition that in the short term, that's just, we'll go back there, and they're all really proud of what's been achieved, and we'll get back there. But at the present time, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
What you can do, though, is turn your attention to other areas which will really resonate with consumers, which is around food waste, for example. So haven't we all been really responsible, because we've been facing potential shortages with food? We don't want to waste anything. We've got store cupboard recipes coming out of our ears. There's a real focus now on habits, and hopefully those habits in the home as well as those habits at work will change. As we know, food waste has a massive impact on our carbon footprint, probably more than anything else we do. So yeah, I think sustainability is still very much at the top of people's agenda. It just might have a slightly different focus for now around waste or community initiatives or things that we can actually impact.
No, I'd agree with that. And I think there's some fantastic statistics coming out about the reduction in food waste, because people are managing their own ingredients and their own fridges in a way they never have done before. And we're not being as wasteful across the industry, which is a wonderful result, at least. Talking about the long-term effects, my next question is, what do you think will be the lasting design legacy of the pandemic? And Robbie, I was going to ask your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think from a legacy point of view, I think more robust, intelligent, smart design based on delivering a strategy, business plan, but at the same time is a fully 360-degree experience. Just looking, that's going to be really important. Spaces will need to work harder. I think hybrids will become, more common in workplace spaces, and also in, on the high street, destination, and in hotels. I think one thing, carrying on to what Louise was saying, the buffet. Where does the buffet fit into all this? Thank God, we're going to have to look at that, which is not a bad thing. But it's that's going to be smart design, but also thinking about how the teams work with that design. And I think people are cooking more. This whole thing has got people cooking a lot more. And so when it comes to paying, to go to a restaurant, and realizing that actually that steak cost me £7 when I bought it in the butcher's and I cooked it at home, and then suddenly I'm paying £30 in a restaurant, you're going to have to think, well, what else am I getting? So these experiences, has got to be something bigger than what we, perhaps than what we're doing today. So I think there's an opportunity to create much more 360 immersive escapist concepts. It's real amazing. It's like going to a fun fair. This has got to be a complete story. This is not just about the food. I go on about this all the time. But so I think this is going to help us realize that design, has to be smarter, and we've got to think about all those elements. The lighting and the music and the tableware, the uniforms and that style of service, all those key points, the tone of voice, all those elements, is going to be really important. And I think when it comes to another key point is going to be transparency on everything. People are going to know what's being cooked, how it's being cooked, where it's being cooked. Open those kitchens. Tell me what's in the menus. How do we translate that sustainable story through menu copy? And then how do we communicate that through the actual story? And how do the team talk about that? That's going to be really quite key, and I think this is going to be quite exciting because it gives us another opportunity to create something which is more than just going into a place and being served food.
Yeah, can I ask a very quick question, because we're all running out of time. We have had a lot of questions from the audience, which is wonderful. Peter's asked, do we think this is the end of the breakfast buffet? I'll start with you, Robbie. You seem quite opinionated about the buffet options. Will we see them going forwards?
I think what? I think we need to think about what that buffet experience looks like on one table. So rather than just saying we're not going to see buffets, what is that reimagined buffet experience? Because it's going to be very hard telling someone that they can't, have a breakfast buffet. So what do you possibly do on the table where you can bring that to life? So is it a basket of breads? Is it a beautiful plate, or a stand of charcuterie and cheeses and fruits? We've got to think outside the box. So I think the buffet will be challenged, absolutely, but I think we've got to find a way of creating a bigger experience around the concept of a buffet, but not necessarily in a traditional format.
Yeah, great. I know I'd share that comment. Okay, we're going to wrap things up shortly. I want to leave on a positive note. So my final question is, what silver linings do we all hope to see to come out of the COVID-19 situation once a vaccine has been found, in regards to design, but also, I guess, in regards to experiences in our sector? So I'm going to start with David. Perhaps you can share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you, I don't know if anyone's seen a book called The Psychology of Pandemics by Stephen Taylor. He's a guy that studied this and had the magical foresight to release this book in December last year. So I'm sure his publisher is absolutely the happiest person in the world. But he identifies that one of the most common after effects of a pandemic is a rise in altruistic behavior. And this is kind of quite commonly seen after previous pandemics. And I would hope that is what we see coming through. We've all pulled together. We're probably more sociable, even though we're apart in many ways. We maybe know our neighbours. We know who the elderly people are on the street that that need looking out for. And the result of that is I'd like to see that coming in more and more to society and to design. In terms of design, I could see, and hospitality and restaurants, I could see that coming through in two strands. One, sustainability getting kicked even further up the agenda as it needs to be. And the second are businesses based on social purpose. So people like Change Please, the coffee guys, people that you can see with that sincere heart in why they're doing it and not just for the short term. That's what I would like to see happen.
Yeah, me too. Ollie, can I ask you the same question? What positive outcomes do you think are going to come from this experience?
I'm ticking all of David's there. I think things like a big resetting of our values and what's important to us. In enjoying the quality of things, taking pleasure from the stuff that is there, and being more discerning about what we do and why we do it. I think from a design and a business perspective, I think we're going to see the rise of a whole sort of pandemic-proof businesses. This is staying on silver linings, but these things may happen again, and what we need to make sure is that it isn't as bad and we can cope with it. So I think hopefully a lot of things will be put in place with businesses to take this in their stride going forward. And then I think, yes, again, so double underlining the thing David said around social purposes. I think the businesses that are doing the best in this are the ones that are going in, looking out for their customers and their employees and their suppliers, and the way you go into this kind of situation and the way you come out from it is going to stand you in good stead and going to set what it means to be a business going forward and develop loyalty.
Great. And Louise, can I ask you for your thoughts on the silver linings that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an appreciation of human relationships. So, how much have we all missed being actually able to talk to our friends, to see our friends in person? Zoom just doesn't cut it. It's exhausting. It's not the same. And, that freedom just to be able to see people, to talk to people, to, connect with people properly, I think is something that we, never really realised that we had to appreciate. But actually, I will feel much more appreciative of the people that I can see in my life. I think there's something else around food, which is about immunity and health and well-being. There's a real realization that your immune system is not something you should take for granted either. And actually the food that you eat has a massive impact on that. And staying healthy isn't just something that, is a nice to do. It's something that is fundamental to our own resilience and longevity. So I really hope to see people making healthier choices, and us as a business being able to help them make healthier choices in the future.
Yeah, I think resilience is super important going forwards, as well as the well-being, both physical and mental aspects of our operations and for one another. And then finally, Robbie, can I ask you what positives you hope to come from this situation?
Oh, God, it's all positives, really. I think, people will appreciate restaurants, and they will appreciate there's a big difference between being a foodie or loving food and going out and really enjoying going to restaurants. I think that's going to be so important. And also, I'm going to think, we're going to highlight some of those really difficult questions in society when it comes to hospitality. That whole dynamic between the economics, between landlords and rent, and how much what is sustainable, and how we pay teams, and what does trunk look like, and why, all these things. And then when it comes to supply chains as well. So I think we're going to learn all these great things, and we have to learn. Going back to what I was saying right at the beginning, is this: we don't want to go back to what it was before. We want to go back to something which is better and a different world. And unfortunately, we are going to lose some restaurants, I think. And but I think we need to look at where we're going forward. And this is a very positive thing.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I share that. I share the same sentiments, and I'm trying to look at this as an opportunity and something we can all grow and develop from, and obviously become a more stronger industry as a result of all of this. So that's all the time we have for questions for. Thank you to everyone who's wrote in, and I'm sorry that I didn't have the chance to respond to all of those. But many thanks to all of our panelists for their fascinating insights into the future of restaurant design. Next in our Future of Hospitality series, we'll be Luxi Dayanadan hosting a panel of experts discussing the future of health and well-being in the workplace, and that's going to be on Monday at 3:30. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us today, and goodbye.
Thanks, Gavin.